Alright, so today we're going to be installing the Bavsound Revenant amplifier in my 2009 E92 335i. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an unboxing here, and then we'll move into a full installation, and we'll see how we like the sound. I will be doing the full Bavsound upgrade in the car, including replacing all of the mid-ranges, tweeters, as well as installing their ghost subwoofers. So this will be a three-part series. So let's get started with the unboxing here. First thing to note, really nice packaging. And the box was really heavy as well, something I really liked. We have a little bit of a quick start guide here. And we see opening this, that has a little bit of instructions regarding the installation. And it mentions they have some video install guides there. And then it mentions kind of setting the EQ and configuring the amplifier to your specific speaker setup in your car, either the hi-fi or the actual Bavsound speakers. So this is nice because you can run this amplifier with the stock speakers, and you can also run it with the full Bavsound upgrade like I'll be doing. Alright, so in the box here, we see the amp is over here on the left. It is much smaller than my original hi-fi amp. I really like the build quality on this. I'll pull it out here in nice plastic packaging. Really heavy product. Taking it out here. It's pretty compact. On this side here, you can see we have USB. We have the control button that'll allow us to change between the hi-fi or Bavsound configurations. We have an optical input. We have a remote out and the line out here. And then on the other side, we have the OEM kind of connections for the system connector 1, as well as the power input as well. We won't be using all of these, but it does have some nice options for upgrades and expandability. So on the other side of the amplifier here, pulling this open, you can see we have some Velcro strips. These Velcro strips will be used to mount the amplifier on the OEM bracket. It doesn't have on the bottom, as you can see, any OEM mounting locations, so you use the Velcro adhesive and it works quite nicely. And then lastly here, we have the harness, which will connect, this end will connect to the OEM harness that connects into your current amplifier, and then this will go into the other end of the Bavsound amplifier. And then lastly, we have what appears to be another bracket, as well as some mounting hardware that looks like some hex bolts here. So overall, really nice packaging. Build quality looks really nice. So we'll dive right into the installation here. And one thing I do want to note about this installation is it won't be the same for everyone, because in my car, I recently had a leak in the trunk, which actually fried my original amplifier. Upon some investigation, we kind of found that it was the tail lights that were leaking in water and flooding that area in the trunk where the amplifier sits. And the problem with this is my car had a little bit of an accident before I bought it, so there was some damage to that panel. So we hammered out the panel and tried to stop the leak. We replaced the taillight seal, which is a common point of failure on the E92. So I highly recommend you replace your taillight seals as well as the washers around them before you do this. So I'm going to look around in the trunk and see if there might be a better mounting point for this, just because I have had that damage to that rear quarter panel, just to make sure I won't get this guy wet in the future. So let's dive into the installation by disassembling the car. To get started, we want to remove this black panel here. This will be a little bit of an expedited removal of the panels here, because I already had them off for diagnosing this trunk leak. So I won't be actually removing the screws, but I'll be showing you the locations as well as what type of bolt you'll need to remove and how to remove it. So to go about removing the black panel, there are 2 screws here and here. There are coverings over them, so you can pop them out with a flathead screwdriver and then just unscrew these bolts here. And then if you look around here behind the panel, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 compression fittings here. And this is really helpful to have an interior pry tool, because you can really wrap around the fitting and pull it out, as opposed to kind of trying to finagle it out with a flathead screwdriver. So with all of the bolts removed on this panel, we want to remove the main carpeting here. We can do that by removing this little covering, and then the actual carpet slides off nicely. So with that black panel off, we're going to want to remove this side panel here. To start, there is this gray covering here. You can just remove this with your hand. There's a few clips, but nothing that's too hard to pry out with your hand. That comes off. You can see the clips around here. Just be gentle with it and it should come off just fine without any tools. Going into the trunk, you can see there is another panel here. Again, you can just pry this off with your hands. There are a few clips. I usually start right in here. You can pry off 1, 2, and it comes off nicely like that. You can see the clips on the back here. There are 2 in the front and 1 in the back. And you can, again, add that to our collection of parts. So looking in here, we can finally see the amplifier. This is my fried one. You can see the harness isn't connected because I just had it disconnected with the water damage and I have a bag over it. So with that panel off, there are a few more things you'll want to remove. The first is there will be a compression fitting right under here. There will be another one right here, and then another one right over here. So with that final panel on the side here removed, we can see the amp. And if we pull this over, we can really see the actual location of the amp. I already have mine disconnected from the bolts, and I'll show you what needs to be removed here and how we can do that. All right, so you can see my amp is kind of covered in a white chalky covering. That's because of the water damage I had. But as far as removing it goes, there is 1 bolt here. We have 1 here. We have 1 here. And then there will be 1 hidden guy kind of in the back here. Once you have those removed, you can take off the harness, which attaches into the back here. I'll show you what the harness looks like and how you can remove that clip. As far as the harness is concerned, it's a pretty simple operation. There's a little clip here that this bar has to slide over, and basically you just need to depress the clip, and you can move the bar freely, and you'll just want to slide that up, and then you can just pull it right out of the amp, and you're good to go. All right, so with everything disconnected from the amp, the whole bracket comes out, and you can just slide it out nicely like this. All right, so this is usually the point in the installation where you would remove the stock amplifier from the bracket and install the Revenant using the included bracket here or the Velcro strips. However, due to the kind of history of my car with this leaking issue in the trunk, and given the fact that I'm not 100% sure the leaking has stopped completely, I've taken an alternative route here, and if you're having similar issues, this might be the way to go. It's not the prettiest look in your trunk. However, I think this will give me a lot of peace of mind in terms of my amp being safe from any water and moisture. And I might go back and make this a little bit cleaner further along the line. But for right now, basically what I've done is the little panel that sits on top of the carpet in the trunk, I've removed it, and I've screwed in a wood block here to kind of level it with the surface. You can see I've just used 3 wood screws in the little holes right around here. So that bracket's held pretty firmly in place. And then what I'll do is I will use the included Velcro, and I'm going to attach this right on top of this. And then what I'll do is I will drill a hole in the trunk liner to kind of run the cable through there. And yeah, that should be it. With the adhesive set, we kind of have our makeshift bracket for the Revenant here. And it's kind of disappointing that I have to use this solution because this amplifier really is a very elegant OEM replacement that bolts just right onto that factory bracket. But I think having the peace of mind that I won't ruin this very nice amplifier is worth it. So with that said, let us get it into the car and wire it up. So the next step for me is to attach the included harness to the factory harness and plug it into the amp. The way I'm going to do it involves me cutting a small hole in the trunk liner. However, if you're just installing it in the factory location, all you need to do is plug it in and connect it and you'll be good as done. So I'll go ahead and make this incision here and then we'll be ready to test it. All right, so it's time to connect the new harness to the old harness. This really only goes in one way, so it's pretty straightforward. You just need to match the pins up and it'll clip in quite nicely. So for me, I'll go right this way and just insert it. It'll go all the way in here. So again, we push in and it'll just snap in. Pretty straightforward. And notice that the clip here is in the top position. So as you can see, we have the little fastening clip is in the upright position. This is pretty flush with the new bracket, and it is locked in place and good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out where I want to make an incision in my trunk liner to run these cables out to my makeshift mount. Alright, so I went ahead and I made my incision here in the trunk liner to run the cables out. I don't think I'm going to need much room to actually pull the cables through, so that's probably as far as I'm going to go. I'm going to zip tie behind it just to clean it up a little bit behind. So yeah, basically our next step for anyone installing the amp normally, we have the system connector 2, which is our power, and we have our system connector 1. And yeah, we'll go ahead and plug those in, and we can actually test the amp. Alright, so I'm going to do the reassembly of my trunk here to get things all buttoned up since the wires are already out and everything's kind of ready to go. Once we get the trunk buttoned up, I'll be able to pop this guy in, plug it in, and we can test the amp and configure the settings here. So I'll get back to you when we are all reassembled. Alright, so here's my final makeshift install here. You can see I have my hole cut out and I have both of the connectors plugged into the amplifier. So with that said, we can turn on the ignition and make sure we're in the right setting for the hi-fi setup. I don't have the other speakers installed just yet, so we're looking for a green light on the amplifier here. The green light is for standard hi-fi systems, while the orange light is for the Harman Kardon or the Bavsound upgrade, which I will be doing shortly. So we'll only be on this green setting to see what the amp sounds like with the hi-fi speakers. Alright, so excuse my stripped down interior, I'm refinishing that at the moment, but I installed the Bavsound amp. I'm on the stock hi-fi speakers right now. Do note that the right mid-range speaker is blown. When I had the water in my amp the first time, it just kind of had a really violent kind of reaction to the water, and I just got a lot of static and screeching noises through the speakers. That was extremely loud. And I think that just kind of pushed my speakers to the limit and blew them out. At least that one. The rest of them are generally intact, but I'm not super sure they're up to par with the way they used to be. So in terms of me turning on the amp for the first time, my first thought was, wow, there's a lot of bass. According to the Bavsound manual, they talk about not setting any of your EQ settings further than 3 in the positive or negative direction. But for me, the bass was kind of overwhelming with the amp, and I lowered it down to 5, and that seemed to be a good bass level for me. With that said, the amp is doing exactly what you'd expect it to do, and it's more powerful, so you're getting a lot more power driven to your speakers. So you'll notice that when you're turning up and down the volume, it'll be a little bit more of a noticeable change with smaller increments of volume compared to the OEM amplifier. And you will notice that bass really is elevated and a lot more intense than it was. With that said, I think when I get the Ghost subwoofers installed under the seats, I think I'll be a lot more happy with the kind of clean, punchy bass as opposed to the more distorted bass you get with the BMW speakers. I don't like that distorted bass, so I turned it down quite a bit to get it to a level I like. So in today's video, we are going to be installing the Bavsound Stage 1 speaker upgrade kit for the E92. This is a plug-and-play replacement for the hi-fi system I originally had in my car. This is video 2 of a 3-part series of the installation. In the first part, I installed the Revenant amplifier, and in the third part, I will install the Ghost Underseat subwoofers. Alright, so we have a few things that are part of this Stage 1 kit. We have the tweeters here. We have the mid-ranges, and they also sent over their installation kits. One of these is for the subwoofer, and one of them is for just general disassembly of everything else, so we'll be using those. I'm not sure which is which, but we'll find out when we open them up. And do keep in mind there are 2 of these boxes since there are mid-ranges in the rear. There's also 2 of these boxes since there are multiple tweeters as well. So I'm going to open these up and let you know what I find inside. So opening the box here, nice packaging. It looks like, wow, some nice packaging holding the speakers in place. Here they are, the two mid-ranges for our E92. You can see they're nice and heavy, and they retain the OEM connectors here, so that'll be awesome. And I will put these aside. So now for the tweeters. All right, opening the tweeter box here. Excuse me for the shakiness. There we are. To install your tweeters / mid-ranges, you must use the included harness. So I do have these harnesses. They're not with me right now, but I'll show you guys what those look like in just a second when I finish this. All right, so for the tweeters, they're very small. You can see them in here. It's a little silver speaker, very small. This is what goes in the little triangles above the door panel. I'm not sure if these are for the front or the rear. They do include two, but I'll confirm that in a little bit. Again, these are the Bavsound Silk Composite Tweeters. So the Silk Composite Tweeters are smaller and do not have the harnesses included on them, and they're included separately, whereas these guys are a little bit bigger and the harness is included in the box. I think when I take the door panels off for installation, it'll become obvious which tweeter goes where. So I'll go ahead and let you know which ones we'll be using for which when we get those door panels taken off. Alright, so as I mentioned earlier, they sent me two installation kits. After opening them, it makes sense that this guy is for the subwoofers, whereas this one is for the installation of just the same stage 1 speakers we were just talking about. You can see it includes the pry tool, as well as a wrench, another interior pry tool, and some various Torx bits and screwdrivers, as well as a pick, whereas this includes a more heavier ratchet, pry tools, and Torx bits. This is a really nice tool set. The tools are really heavy and well made, and it includes a little Bavsound logo, and it rolls up nicely with the Velcro. Again, you can see the same thing on this guy. Where is it? Right over here. So we'll take this kit, and we'll go to the car and take that door panel off. And once we get the door panel off, we'll bring it back in here to install the speakers. And I'll be walking you through how we're going to take that door panel off. All right, so to install the speakers, there is one mid-range located in the front right here, and one tweeter located right here. You need to remove the whole door panel to access the speakers, and we'll be doing the installation of the speakers with the door panel off in a separate area. So I recommend finding something to sit on. I'm sitting on a bucket. The Bavsound kit has everything you need, including a screwdriver with interchangeable bits. The one you'll really need for this install is a T20, but it includes two separate sets of bits here, and they're all labeled. It's very nice. So I'll be using this for a lot of other things once I'm finished with this install. Then you have the pick tool. This will be really helpful for a few things that I'll show you later. And then you have the pry tool as well. So I've already done the passenger side installation. It's a little different on the passenger side, but not very much. You have the bar for passengers to grasp that goes from here to here. And the only thing that differs in the install is you just need to pry that piece off. You can get it from the bottom, and then you can just work the piece off with your hand. And there will be a T20 towards the top fit that you'll need to remove to get the door panel off. Aside from that, the installation will be the same. Now, since I have my interior trim off at the moment, I am skipping one step with this that you'll have to do, and that is to remove your interior trim from this piece. All you have to do is take your pry tool, lift under here, and as you see, there are a bunch of clips that go along here. And if this is your first time taking your trim off, I recommend getting some replacement female clips for this. They break off or fall off really easily. I have a bunch, so I'll be replacing all of these pieces when I go to reinstall my trim. So in terms of first steps, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 T20s going along here. You want to remove all 4 of those T20s. All right, with these 4 Torx off, we can go ahead and start to remove the panel. I highly recommend you do this with your window open, and I'll show you why a little bit later. So basically to start it, you're going to take your pry tool and work your way around the edge. And once you get it started, you can kind of just take it with your hand. A few things to be cautious about is this guy right here is a long pin. You do not want to rip this off, so be careful to remove it around this. And the other thing is it's connected to a lot of wires, so don't really rip off that panel because you'll end up pulling on those wires. So be really careful as you slowly pull it off, and I'll show you here. So again, starting over here, working in my pry tool. There you go. You kind of hear some of the clips. I'm done with the pry tool. I'm going to use my hands and work around the bottom. I recommend doing the top last. We've already broken one of the clips. That's okay. I do recommend buying some extra clips here. A lot of people can be successful without buying the clips. They don't break any, but it's a little tough. All right, the bottom is dislodged, so now we're going to kind of work away the top. There are, I believe, 5 clips up here. And you'll want to push this down and see if you can get around it. There we go. There's that top one. We can try to push this down now. Working on the panel. There we go. I'm going to stand up so I can see. There we go. And now we got it. All right. So with the panel removed, be really careful and just tilt it over. If you can see, one of them already dislodged. But there's some connectors here that hold the speakers. So you're just going to want to remove everything carefully. There we go. There's one up here. There we go. There's one down here. This one's a little tricky. There's a sliding clip mechanism. You're just going to depress the tab and slide this mechanism down. It'll pull right out. All right, with that out, there is the little mechanism for the door lock indicator right down here. And this, you're just going to kind of pull this part out right here. And then just kind of pop it out. There you go. And it'll slide right off. And then lastly, there's your light down here. And with that, the door panel is off. And I'll go ahead and carefully set it aside. With the door panel removed, we will want to remove the tweeter, which is right here. And this is basically just kind of on with a pressure clip kind of thing. So we'll just want to pry it up at the bottom here. And it should kind of, you want to pull it up and out. And it should just kind of come off naturally. Don't be afraid if you hear any clips. There we go. With this off, we're good to go and start replacing the speakers. So I'm going to go ahead and take these, and I'll be right with you when we're going to install the speakers. All right, with the door panel removed, we'll go ahead and start installing the Bavsound speakers. There are 3 T20s surrounding the mid-range speaker, so we will remove these, and we'll be able to pop the new one right in. Now, there's an important note here that I didn't realize doing the first part, is the grill on the front of the speaker that you'll be able to see in the car. That needs to be put on before the door panel is put on. You can't put that on after the door panel has been installed. So basically, if your grill on the speaker, which is this guy right here, comes loose when you are installing it, make sure, if this grill comes loose anytime throughout the process, make sure you get it back on before the speaker is mounted, because it won't be able to go on any other time. So with that said, we can go and install the new Bavsound mid-range speakers. Now, if you're like me and you're installing this, you'll notice the connectors are quite a bit different, and you might be thinking, they sent me the wrong pair of speakers, what the heck? So unlike the stock speakers that have 2 connections right here, this has 2 very long connections, and this will be going to your OEM input, and then this will be going out to the tweeter, which does not have a connector like the original, which was a little bit confusing and concerning for me the first time, but don't worry about that, it should be all good. So make sure the ring you saw it fall off is around the speaker. I'm going to face it down. I had the best luck with that the other way because of the long cables. So the cable end facing that way towards the bottom of the door panel. We're making sure that ring is on nice and tight. And then we will just lower this down nice and easy. We'll just pop the screws back on. And that's basically all you need to do for the mid-range. And the tweeter is a little bit more tricky, but nothing you can't handle. Oops. And just make sure you're working the screws down very slowly and incrementally. Don't crank one down all the way on one side before you put the other ones in. We're going to just get them hand tight lightly on each one, and then we'll work it down and get them nice and snug. And this is the type of application where you don't want to go crazy tight. You don't need to ratchet it down with all your force. Just nice and snug by hand. I'm not even going to use a ratchet, just the screwdriver. Nice and snug. Nice and snug. Nice and snug. And I'll just check one more time, because every time you kind of go around, you do get a little bit more leeway in the other ones. And bam, there we have it. And we'll just double check. Is our grill installed? Yes, it is. So we're good to go on that. And now we will go ahead and install the tweeter. And as you can see, this is the old mid-range speaker. If you listen to it, you can kind of hear the noise it makes when you depress it. And it was creating a lot of distortion in the music when you're doing it. Even with the chime, in my car specifically, when you had the door chime because the key is on and the door is open, you'll really notice the speaker's distortion in that. I put my ear up to both of the original mid-ranges, and you could really hear the distortion in the speakers. And comparatively, the Bavsound speakers, nice and heavy, they have fresh domes, and they should give us some really nice sound quality. So I'm excited to see what it sounds like. So with the door panel installed in the mid-range, we will move on to the tweeter here. I'll move the camera down and do this on a towel or something soft because you don't want to damage the door panel. So basically there's this kind of foam in here, and this is just kind of snugged in here. There's no clips or anything. It's just in here by force. And be careful because the middle of it is very flimsy, and if you pull too hard, you might break that in half. I almost did the first time. Just be really gentle, kind of working it around. And this side, there's a little lip, so you'll really want to focus on getting this out. And once you get this, it'll slide out really nice. And you can see the OEM BMW tweeter. There's a few ways to do this, to replace it. There is this removable area in here. It came off just without me trying the first time, and I'm going to leave it in this time. It should be a very similar process. Using the pick tool included by in the Bavsound kit, we're really just going to work around. There are 4 clips, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you just need to depress the clips and you can pull the speaker out pretty easily. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Just work your way on the outside. It takes a little bit of work, but there's a metal lip around here, and you just need to get these plastic clips around the metal lip. And when you get one, the others just kind of come, and then it'll pry out pretty nicely. It took me a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but we got her done. Now we'll take the Bavsound speaker. So this is what the Bavsound speaker looks like when you get it. Just remove the little styrofoam here. You can see much heavier than the OEM speaker. We have this nice metal enclosure. I really like the way it feels, and hopefully the sound will reflect the build quality. So we do want the wires to be kind of focused, aiming out the triangle as it was originally. It doesn't matter what orientation you put this in, so just kind of place it on top and apply a little bit of light pressure, and it'll pop in around the clips. There you go. You heard a nice satisfying snap. Just kind of run it over with your fingers, make sure all sides are in. You can see right there, we have installed the Bavsound tweeter. Before I get too involved in the wiring on the door, it's a little difficult to show this. So we do have these 2 wires I mentioned before. The black goes to the harness on the Bavsound tweeter. That'll clip in nicely around here. And the green will go to the car itself. And before we get started with that, we will put the foam back on the tweeter. To do that, as you can see, we will take this and just really gonna get it snug in here. And you can see the indentation where the cable comes out. So just kind of work it in and make sure the cable comes out of that little indentation. It's pretty easy. Pop it in. It'll make a nice satisfying sound. Sometimes it does not seem to be super in place, and that's just because there's nothing really locking it in. It's just kind of held in here by the pressure of these fittings. All right, so with that on, we can get started with reinstalling everything. All right, so now we're going to reinstall our tweeter before we get the panel installed. So usually on the door panel, there's a little metal clip that you're going to want to remove with the pry tool. That'll make your life a little bit easier. I'll show you what it will look like. I don't have the clip on my car on this side of the door for some reason, but you can see in this opening right here, there's supposed to be a metal clip that kind of holds the pin from the tweeter in place. And what you can do is you can kind of work it out with the pry tool like this. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to take that metal clip, and on this pin right here, you'll put the metal clip on it before you install it, and it'll make putting the tweeter back on a little easier. But since I don't have that, I'm just going to go ahead and show you what the install will look like. So if you look at the holes this goes into, the top is where that metal bracket is that I just showed you, and at the bottom here we have kind of a large opening followed by a really narrow opening, and that's basically a channel for this to go into. So you stick it into the larger opening and you just slide it down, and that's what locks it in place. So what we're going to do is you kind of want to start at an angle like this, and you'll start sliding it down, and once that's down you'll kind of work it up like that. So I'll show you how that's done. And you do want this to go inside the little trim here. So again, we're really working it in here, and we slide it down. You can kind of feel it going in through the channel, and then now we're right into the groove, and we'll just kind of push it in like this, and you'll hear a pretty satisfying click. And again, that's all you need to do, and it's installed. All right, so now we are on to probably the toughest part of this installation, which is putting this panel back on. As I mentioned before, I recommend doing this with your window open, and I'll show you why in a minute. There are a few things. So as you can see right here, and it looks like just those two spots. Oh, no, and here. There are 3 clips that have been broken. I went ahead and purchased some new ones, and we do want to reinstall those before we get the door panel back on. So they just slide in to these little indentations here. And then we have our new clips on. They are different colored on the car, but according to BMW, they're the same thing, with just different part numbers. All right, so with that said, we want to plug in everything first, and then we'll go ahead and start to line up and mount the panel. So on the tweeter here, this is zip tied from Bavsound. You want to undo the zip tie. It'll make your life a little bit easier and make the door panel go on a little bit more smooth and flush. So we'll undo the zip tie, and we're going to start by connecting this black connector from the tweeter to the mid-range speaker. It goes over nicely like this and clips in. And we'll do the same with the OEM blue connector. It takes a little bit of time to figure out the orientation of this, but it'll snap in pretty nicely once you get it. And then we have the big black connector here, and that will go back on to this guy, again putting it in, and then we'll just slide the lever up until it locks in place. Then we have the one that goes to the floor light. Some people take this off first, but I don't see a problem doing it later like I am now. Some of the cables are shorter than others, so you will need to kind of tilt the door panel to get them going. So we'll connect this white cable. This is one of the ones that's more of a stretch that goes all the way to the top over here. So I'm going to start standing up once I get this guy in. And I do recommend you get this going standing up. It'll just make your life a little bit easier. So I'm standing up. So this guy, like we did before, will go over this and kind of clip on. Then we'll just pull it down until it goes under there. And there are some connectors to kind of help with cable management from BMW, and put as many of those in as you can. And with that, that should be all of them. We have this guy, this guy, this guy. This guy is all nice and snug. And we do have a little bit of room here. And you do want to make sure you take this little module from Bavsound. You do want to kind of thread it around here so it's not pressing up against the door panel. So you can use one of those kind of gaps in it to kind of hold it. So with that, we're going to kind of start from the top. I found is easiest, And the most important thing is getting the lock indicator. So I'm going to stand up here with the door panel, keeping it nice and close. And we see the lock, this guy. We want to make sure we get this through the hole first. And it takes a little bit of work, but you can get it. The reason why we have the window open is because you can see the clips that go on the top of the door, and it makes it really easy to line up compared to just trying to blindly do it by yourself. And then we will go ahead and align all of our clips. And we'll see it start to line up nicely. Making sure it's level along the way. We can really, yeah. All right, we got it. It appears along here. All right, so with the door panel installed, we'll just need to go ahead and put in the 4 Torx and install our trim piece, and we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and put those back on, and I'll get back to you when we're ready to do the rear seats. All right, so right now we're going to be doing the back install of the Stage 1 Bavsound speaker upgrade. It's a little tricky because we are stuck in the back seat, and once we do get the seat out, it's a little tricky to find a good spot to be in here. It'll be a lot easier if you're shorter than I am, but we'll make it work. So I already did the driver's side installation, so we'll be taking care of the passenger side. The installation is the same on both sides. So to get started, we will need the same tools that we did for the front. I will be using the Bavsound installation kit that they nicely sent me with the T20 primarily, as well as their metal pry tool that I'll show you when we get the door panel off. So unlike the front door panel, this only has 2 T20s right here. There'll be one here, and there's one here. So we'll go ahead and start by taking those off. It appears I don't have a T20 here for some strange reason, so we'll be skipping that one, and I guess I'll have to find another T20 at a later point in time. And then we'll be doing this guy back here. And it's hard to see the screw in this one, so we're really going to have to kind of find an angle so we can see the screw and get that out. Right, we got the T20 out, and now it's just a matter of pulling the actual panel itself out. We will start by removing the seat where I'm sitting here. It's just clipped on, so we'll just kind of yank it out and it'll be set free. And then we'll go ahead and remove the panel itself. You want to get out of the car to do this, and you want to get a good angle where you'll have some leverage because it's in there pretty good, and just kind of tug. Maybe it's easier to start on one of the sides. There's one. There's 2. And then it'll just be set free. It's just those 2, and we can rip out the seats. Now this is a great time to clean your car when you're doing the speaker upgrade. If I haven't mentioned it already, I'll definitely be vacuuming the seats back here. However, I won't be putting the seats back in. I'm actually doing a seat delete, so I'll show you how to do it, but I'm not going to be doing it myself. But we'll be able to vacuum under the seats a lot too when we go ahead and put in the underseat subwoofers. And you might find some goodies like some spare change. So far, I am 15 cents richer from the Bavsound upgrade. Good stuff. And looks like we have some extra panels that we're missing from the car. All right, so now we want to remove this guy here in the corner. This one gave me a lot of trouble on the other side. We're just going to want to remove the seatbelt out of the way. And again, it's just kind of fitted on, so we'll just want to yank it off as hard as we can, basically. And you do kind of want to pull down because there's that plastic bit. There we go. We did break something off, it looks like. One of the clips. Yeah, we ripped off this clip. These are really brittle panels, so you are going to want to be careful. But sometimes there's not a lot that can be done. So just be careful taking it off. just know it's kind of fitted upwards into it. It won't be the end of the world if you can't get this back on exactly. I'll probably just JB weld the panel, the clip back on. Yeah, it goes like this. All right, so the side panel, we're going to want to remove this bottom trim right here. It's just put on with some clips. It looks like some of which are broken, but you don't need much. Just kind of pull a few clips off and you'll be good to go. So with that off, we can actually start to take the panel itself off. Now you're going to have to be careful doing this because there are a lot of exposed wires, as there was on the other side. So you're going to want to pry off, but don't pull the panel too far away from the car itself. So generally you can kind of start from the bottom, and this is a lot easier to get off and on than the front panel. So again, I got one. Here we go. There's the one down here. I have to get a better angle. Oh, try not to scrape your hand off. Ooh, okay. And then we'll get the top ones. There we go. And then this is kind of fitted up into it, so you'll just kind of want to pull it out like so. There we go. And then we'll just want to move the seatbelt out of the way, and we can pull it back and see the cables here. So the cables back here are actually pretty taut. There's just a few of these cables that we'll need to remove compared to the front. All right, so the first clip we're going to want to remove is this white one, followed by the black one that connects to the seatbelt extender module, as well as the blue one that connects to the speaker. So this gets kind of a two-handed operation, but they're pretty easy to remove. You might need some needle nose pliers to take out the one from the OEM mid-range. I had two on the other side. It's just a little tight fit with the speaker on the side, but some needle nose pliers got it free. So I'll get back to you when those cables are removed. I do want to note that on the module here, it does have a tab you have to depress to pull the connector out, but that's pretty straightforward. And you can see I have all of the connections removed. So we're going to go ahead and go to the workshop and we'll get installing the speakers. All right, so I have the panel removed. I have it ready to go. And there's a few different things from the front panel that make it a little bit more complicated in terms of putting the speakers in, but it's still really straightforward and a fairly simple process, a lot easier than I thought it would be. So basically there are a few metal tabs that you need to remove that are holding this foam in. There's one here, 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 and here. And you want to use the metal pry tool they included, not the plastic one, to take these out. It can be a little bit tricky, and sometimes you might want to use a flathead screwdriver to try and pry it out, but just kind of working under it, rocking back and forth lightly, and it'll pop off. I'll show you this is what the clip looks like. So there's two sides of it. One kind of sticks up and one is flat. And the side that kind of is bowl-shaped goes up, so you want to put it on like that when we're reinstalling it. So let me go ahead and pop the others off. The one in the center is a little tricky because the bowls are, don't be afraid to really bend it. The bone's pretty pliable, so it's not going to move. That's the whole on it. And up and forth. And one here. Rocking back forth. Forth. And the last one is ready. You're going to have to get down in there. Rock it. And there's one. All right, so with that, we can remove the foam panel. And for some reason, the orientation of this panel was really difficult for me to put back on, so just take it off gently. It's kind of flimsy, and just make sure you remember which way it's oriented, because for some reason that took me a while to figure out. All right, we have that off, and now you can see here we have our tweeter and we have our mid-range, and the tweeter's a little bit different. Instead of just kind of being pressure fit in, there's a screw that you must remove from kind of the outside. So take off that little screw, and we'll want to slide it down, and we'll want to remove the blue connector from here, as well as the kind of thing, the harness that's kind of holding it in. There we go. With that out, we should be able to push this through, and we can show you, and this is the OEM tweeter. We will need to remove the tweeter from the housing here, and I'll show you how to do it once we get the mid-range off. All right, mid-range is exactly the same as the the front speakers, so 3 T20s. Just unscrew those. 1, 2, 3, and then you can see the mid-range pops off. These are in a lot better shape actually than my front speakers. You can see you don't get a lot of the noise if you play with the speaker here. So these are actually in a little better shape, but the Bavsound should make a big difference. So I'll show you how to remove the tweeter now. All right, so now we're going to be removing the tweeter from the OEM enclosure. It's a little tricky to get out, and Bavsound recommends you use their metal pry tool that we use to remove the foam from the backing here. But we're going to use a flathead screwdriver. I found that to be a lot more straightforward. So basically, we're trying to remove this plate that is covering the back here. It's a flat plate, and you can kind of get it off by working around here, just putting some pressure on each side, and it's pretty tricky to get out, in all honesty. So don't be afraid to kind of mangle it, because we're not reusing it, nor are we reusing the tweeter. So just kind of work under there with this flathead. There we go. Got it. And then, there we go. All right, I'm gonna try this second time. I can get a little bit more through. Yeah, I'm gonna get it. We're not using this. The other side. Wow, we really just broke it off, actually. Either way, that's still fine, as long as the inner enclosure stays intact. Wow, it really was stuck in there. Almost like molded to the other part here. All right, and so now we're going to need to remove the actual tweeter from the inner enclosure. And you do want to be careful. I wasn't able to tell super well from the Bavsound video, but there's 2 layers. In the first video I made, or in the first part of my series where we did the tweeters in the front part of the door, we kind of removed this inner part with the metal where you can see the lip, but that actually removes part of the speaker itself that removes this. So we don't want to do that. We want to be removing the outermost layer, which is right around here. So don't try to remove this metal piece. Try to remove this outer piece right here with the little pick tool. It's not too hard. It's a little finicky, but nothing we can't do. And we'll be able just kind of work around with the pick. Wow, just got it in one try compared to last time. Yeah, so let's just try to install the new speaker here. And it's really simple. You just pop it in. It's a lot smaller than the original one because it doesn't have that little enclosure. So we're just going to push it down. Make sure you align the cables where they would come out. So it's kind of weird the way this is set up because the pins from this kind of stick up really high. So we're just going to kind of want to fold it down away to the opposite edge because that'll allow us to get the flattest kind of fit with it. And then you see the opening on the bottom. We'll put it in so those cables are kind of running out the bottom. And then clips in really nicely. We're good to go. And now we can get this guy installed. All right, so to install the tweeter, it's just kind of the reverse of the process we already started. We'll run it through the bottom here. Get it nice and tight through there. Make sure it's flush on the other side. And then we will take our little screw, run the wire through it, and we'll just tighten that up. A little bit more. You don't need to go crazy with this. But there we go. And you see this will just run out here like so. All right, now we will install the mid-range. All right, so we have our Bavsound mid-range. And this installation is just as it was in the front, just the 3 Torx. And this only fits on in one direction, unlike the other guys, so we will need to be mindful of that it'll pop on. That is the orientation we want. Make sure the little foam gasket around here is nice and secure. And that will be it for that. So let's just get the Torx back on. All right, so that takes care of that. And now, as you saw, Bavsound did include the module for these rear tweeters. We need to make sure we get that installed. So this is a little clunky, and we're going to have to be kind of creative with some zip ties on this, just so we make sure we get it installed properly, so it's not smushing it up against the metal of the car. So we'll go ahead and clip this in to the tweeter, and then we will clip the other end into the black lead on the connector itself. There we go. So now the mid-range and the tweeter are connected, and then the blue or the green will connect to the OEM port on the car. So basically what we want to do is we're going to want to zip tie this up and over, but we're going to put the foam back on first so we know where exactly we want this to be. So let me put the foam back on. All right, so as you can see, we have our foam, which kind of lays this way. Again, it's pretty flimsy, so you'll have to be somewhat creative getting it in, but you'll see the foam kind of lays down like this, and we want to get the module right below the seatbelt extender module. So we have our tweeter, so we're going to run the wire around here, and we'll kind of want to zip tie it somewhere over here. And let me get our blue lead is hiding from us. There we go. So we'll just kind of want to zip tie this. I think we'll go this way since this already has the high point, and I'll fold it down a little bit. You can kind of, these do have a little bit of wiggle room, but do be careful if you give those any pulling action. So we'll go ahead and we will zip tie everything up like this, and we will need to zip tie this again once we're in the car, but we'll wait on that for now. So Bavsound does include some zip ties for you. So again, I'll just kind of bunch this all together so our module will stay in place. And there we are. You can see there's a nice little resting place for it there, so we won't end up smushing it against the car. All right, so I'm going to cut off my zip tie. There we are. And we're basically ready to go. We will, again, as I mentioned, we will want to zip tie this again just to make sure everything's intact. I think I actually will zip tie this to this just so it doesn't move around as freely. All right, there we go. And now we will install our panel. This is pretty straightforward. All we're going to need to do is push these clips back on. You can use the same metal pry tool that we use to uninstall them and just kind of rock them side to side until they're back on. So again, with kind of like a bowl facing up, and we'll push down with our tool until they're nice and snug. Just kind of working side to side. That's the only real way to get them on. There's one. There we go. Our foam panel is nice and snug along here. So we are ready to install the panel back into the car. All right, so now we're going to reinstall our panel here. This is kind of a tricky process, but once you get it going, it kind of works itself out. We have broken one of the clips here, so I do have an extra. I'm going to pop that in, and then we'll go ahead and put the panel back on. All right, I'm putting on my extra clip. All right, and so basically now what we're going to want to do first is get our cables plugged back in, then we can kind of work the panel back on. And it is important to note we do want to remove the side trim here, just a little bit of it, because we're going to have to work the panel under it, but that's not very difficult of a process. So to do this, I found it easiest to sit on the center armrest. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. All right, I apologize if you can't see, but basically what we're going to do is get all of our wires plugged in. All right, so to get the panel back in, it's a little tricky. We're going to want to start up here at the top. There's a tab, but we'll want to get in here, working it around the seat belt, just kind of sliding it up. We got it here. There we go. Now we're in. Takes a little bit of finesse, but once you get it, you get it. And then these will clip in real nicely here. And make sure this is under here. Your clip should all pop in nicely, like so. Just give it a good push, make sure everything's in. And that takes care of that step here. And now we're just going to want to do the trim piece down here, and I'll show you that right now. All right, so in terms of the piece down here, again, I mentioned we want to make sure our door panel is behind it. So my clip is broken here, but it has been holding. So now we're just going to want to reinsert this trim like so, getting it down into here. And you can pop it in like that. And there we have it. That is all back installed. And now we'll just need to put in the corner pieces to finish up the installation. And like they were taken out, you can just put them in manually by using a little bit of force, no screws or anything like that. And you'll want to make sure you kind of glide it up. Again, I'm doing a rear seat delete, so I will not be reinstalling that. So that actually concludes my part 2 of the video of installing the Bavsound Stage 1 upgrade in my E92 Coupe. In part 3, I'll be covering the Underseat subwoofer installation. So if you have that or you're looking to get some more information on it, stay tuned. All right, so now we're going to install the Bavsound Ghost Underseat woofers. This is just the third part in my Bavsound installation, and it's pretty straightforward. It just really involves taking off the seat, pushing it back, and then you can install the woofer. So basically what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to push the seat all the way forward, and we'll take the back bolts off first. All right, so move the seat all the way forward. All right, now using the Bavsound included ratchet, which is very nice, and a T50, we'll remove the 2 bolts on the seat sliders here. Takes a little bit of force to get them off initially, but nothing too bad. And there's it. Alright, there's the second one. Now we're going to move the seat all the way back, and we will remove the same 2 bolts in the front, again T50s, and then the seat will come free. Alright, with the last bolt free, the seat is now loose, and we can kind of fold it back to allow us room to remove the subwoofer. Now, it's kind of tricky to do this because the seat, when you fold it over for like allowing passengers in the back seat, it doesn't lock. So you kind of need to find the right angle where that'll stay in place, because you need it to be more upright to give yourself some room. So basically there are a few Phillips head bolts holding the cover on for the OEM subwoofer, so we're going to go ahead and remove those. Now you do want to be careful because these are in pretty tightly, so you want to use the right head Phillips bit or you'll end up stripping some of the screws, which we do not want to do. And be careful to make sure you don't get the seat falling on you. Make sure it's secure. All right, with these screws off, we can take off the dust cover here. And we'll go ahead and clean this a little too, just so it's a little fresher. This is a good time to vacuum under your seats, and I'll go ahead and do that once I'm finished installing the new subwoofer here, or actually once I remove this one. So the subwoofer itself has a few screws, and I will bring the camera in. They're again T20s. There's 1, 2 at the top, and there'll be 2 more at the bottom. You do have to pry the carpet up to get at these, There's one and there's one here, and the connector's down here as well. So it's a little finicky. I like to take the screws out first, and then we'll go ahead and remove the connector after the subwoofer's been removed. So I'll go ahead and do that now. All right, so with the 4 Torx removed from the subwoofer, I'm going to go ahead and take the speaker out. The harness is held in with a clip, so you'll need a flathead screwdriver to kind of pry it out. But I'm going to remove the speaker partially, and then it'll be easier to remove that clip, but I'll get my flathead ready. There we go. It's a little stuck, but not the end of the world. I'm just prying it out. You can see we have our speaker here, and we'll go ahead and depress that clip and get it out. There you go, tab pressed in. And now we can just kind of rock the speaker out. Here you can see we have our old BMW subwoofer, and I'm going to go ahead and vacuum out the inside of the car, and we'll go ahead and install the new one. Alright, so now we're ready to put in the new Bavsound Go subwoofer, and this is my favorite part of this kit because it's really well made and the metal cover is really nice and it just looks super cool. Kind of a shame we have to put it under the seat, but installation's pretty simple. I'm going to just put the speaker in, lay it down where it line up the holes, and then once that's lined up we can go ahead and insert the OEM harness, and then that's basically it. We just put the old screws back in to mount the speaker, and then we put the dust cover on and reinstall the seat. So let's get the speaker installed. Alright, just making sure the carpet's out of the way, we have the speaker in, and I will go ahead and plug in the harness. Make sure it's plugged in all the way. Alright, that looks good. And we'll go ahead and put in the screws, the T20 screws to hold it in place. And it's important to go around this incrementally, don't crank one down and then the other. You want to do, I usually do it diagonally across, and then just hand tight and then slowly work around getting it nice and tight. Alright, now we can install the grille and get the seat pack on. Getting the cover on is a little bit more tricky than you might think. I had a little bit of trouble with some stripped screws on the other side, so you have to make sure it aligns with the carpet holes pretty nicely, and then you can go ahead and get those Phillips heads back on. So again, just making sure the carpet's nice and in place, and we'll get the holes lined up here. Yeah, this side's going on a lot more nicely for me than the other one was. I'd start on the screws that are trickier. It'll make your life a little bit easier in the long run. All right, there we have it. The grill is installed. Now we'll go ahead and get that seat put back in. So we'll fold it over, and I like to do this kind of incrementally too. So I'll fold it over. I'll put the front T50 Torx bolts back in. I'll just hand tighten them, and then I'll move the seat back and do the same thing in the rear. And then I'll just kind of work my way along, getting it nice and tight so everything goes down nice and snug the way it is from the factory. All right, with those on nice and tight, that concludes the installation of the Bavsound Ghost Underseat subwoofers. So now we can really kind of enjoy our hard work and take a listen. Now we do, as I mentioned before, with the amp, it has two settings, one for the OEM speakers and then another setting for the Bavsound upgrade or the Harman Kardon setup. So I will want to go to the trunk and go ahead and switch that setting over, but that's super simple. So I'm going to clean up and we'll get back right there. All right, so now we're ready for the final step. So what we're going to do is, with the ignition on, we're going to change the setting of the Bavsound amp to the orange light, which will be configured for these new speakers. So I'll go ahead and press it right here. About 2 seconds. So I'll go ahead and press it here. Oh, it just took a minute. Thought I needed to do it again, but as you can see, the status is now on orange, which means we are good to go for the Bavsound speakers. So let's give them a listen.